So the minimum wage debate continues on, and it's so chock full of the same misinformation proponents dole out, but I thought I'd make a video explaining just how it is that employers set wages and make hiring determinations. The minimum wage proponents seem to come from two camps. The first camp is based on the misapprehension that employers are sitting on tons of money, wearing a monocle and cackling as they twirl their handlebar mustaches. Of course, these are the people who limit their discussion of the economic aspects of a minimum wage increase to big corporations like Walmart. Trying to get them to discuss the all-important consequences to small businesses just exposes them for the woos they are. They either ignore it outright, or come right out and say that these small businesses should be put out of business. If they can't afford to pay people a living wage, then they shouldn't be in business at all. They claim to care for people who work at jobs, but they don't care one thing for the small business owners and their employees who will be put out of work as a result. The second camp seems to be stuck in the mindset of wage fund theory, which was pretty much soundly debunked in the 19th century. Wage fund theory is based on a too simple equation. Wage equals capital divided by population. In wage fund theory, there is one big pie of capital that everyone gets a bit of. The more people there are, the smaller the slices of pie they can get. And the bigger piece of pie one person gets, like the CEO, the less pie there is for everyone else. The prediction of wage fund theory is, therefore, if one worker earns more, another worker must earn less. So by raising the minimum wage, you give a bigger piece of pie to the lowest earning workers at the expense of reduced wages of higher earners. Needless to say, wage fund theory has been thoroughly debunked by observation, since it would predict that an increased population would starve more than a small one, and the proponents of the theory suggested population controls for that reason, and some of them still do. But increasing the population to over 300 million didn't make the US more impoverished than in the 1800s when the population was only about 4 or 5 million. People debunk wage fund theory by pointing out that capital isn't constant. Instead of everyone having to get smaller and smaller pieces of a pie, a growing economy makes the pie bigger. But this doesn't really tell the whole story. First of all, it's not really a distinct pie. It's really more of an amorphous blob that ebbs and flows. And yes, it grows, it gets bigger, but not really in ways that can be predicted or controlled from the top down. Nowadays, economically literate people know that wages are set by supply and demand, just like every other price in the market. The employers represent the demand curve, which is the number of employees they can hire at various wages, and which of course is downward sloping. They can afford to hire more people if the wage is lower. So far, this sounds a bit like wage fund theory, but wage fund theory ignores the dynamics of supply and demand. The supply curve is the pool of available workers at every wage level. The higher the wage offered, the more people you'll have applying for the job. So the market seeks an equilibrium wage and quantity, which is the wage at which the number of people applying for jobs matches the number of jobs available at that wage. But even a basic supply-demand graph isn't enough to cover all the nuances. When workers look for work, they look at how much they're going to get paid, as well as what benefits they'll receive, like health insurance. But employers have to look at the total cost of employment, and that isn't just wages plus benefits. It also includes things like employment taxes they pay just because they've hired someone. It includes whatever assets the employee will be using. If this is an office job, for example, then there's rent on the cubicle space, a desk, a chair, various office supplies, a computer, internet access, climate control, and the power to run it all. There's also the costs of running the business itself, including the regulatory burden that have to be factored in across all employees. The employees as a whole need to provide enough productivity to cover not only the costs of employing them, but the other costs of running the business as well. When employers look to hire people, they look at these total costs, not just wages and benefits. So when we look at the supply-demand graph, we need to keep this in mind. Since those extra costs are not reflected on the wage side of the graph, we have to consider their effect on the demand curve. If the total cost of employment goes up, and it doesn't go up because of increased wages, say the employment tax goes up or energy costs rise, then the demand curve shifts to the left, and the equilibrium wage and quantity both go down. Fewer people are hired, and those who are hired at lower wages. On the other hand, if the costs of employment go down, if we eliminate employment taxes, or we lower the regulatory burden, or new computer software makes their work more efficient, then the demand curve shifts to the right, and now more people are hired at higher wages. If you want to increase the amount that people are being paid without destroying jobs, or even while increasing employment, then the costs of running a business need to be reduced. You can remove their requirement to pay payroll taxes or health benefits, or decrease the regulatory burden. Eliminating these extra costs would allow businesses to raise wages for everyone, while creating even more jobs to get unemployment down. Minimum wage simply does not work this way. Minimum wage is a price support. Like all price supports, it has no effect at all if the job in question has an equilibrium wage at or above the minimum. It's only when the minimum wage is above equilibrium that it has any effect at all, and the only effect it has is to destroy jobs. Despite the fact that more people are applying for these jobs because of the higher wages, there are fewer jobs available, because employers simply can't hire as many people at that price level. Absolutely nothing the government does can change this economic reality. Further, since the total cost of employment has now risen, those costs have to be recouped somehow. And since they don't have enormous vaults of gold galleons over at Gringotts, they have to make it back by charging more for their product or service, which means that fewer people will buy them, supply and demand again, and the business must downsize. When we look at the actual economics of wages, and not long-debunked theories like wage fund theory, or insane delusions like employers sitting on underground vaults full of money, there's only one conclusion to draw, and it's the conclusion supported by 85% of studies on the effects of minimum wage on unemployment. Minimum wage destroys jobs, and it especially harms the very low-income workers it purports to help.